In a small town in Edo State, Nigeria, there was one place everyone knew, the small but famous food shop of Mama Mariam. People came from every corner of the community just to eat her food. It was said to be the sweetest food anyone had ever tasted. Her shop was simple, a wooden structure with a zinc roof and wooden benches inside. But to the people in the town, it felt like a royal dining room. Mama Mariam was a middle-aged woman, about 45 years old, with a round face and a bright smile that could warm anyone's heart. She wore colorful Ankara wrappers every day, and her headscarf was always tied neatly. No one really knew much about Mama Mariam's past. She had no husband and no family in town. But everyone loved her, not just for her food but because she was kind and welcoming to everyone. Mama Mariam's food was a miracle in itself. Whether it was amla, egusi soup, vegetable soup, rice and beans, or groundnut soup, the taste was always unforgettable. People would say, once you eat at Mama Mariam's, no other food will taste sweet again. Parents told their children, if you're hungry, don't waste your money anywhere else. Go to Mama Mariam's place. Every morning, before the sun rose, the smell of cooking would drift out of Mama Mariam's kitchen. By 7 a.m., the line outside her small shop would stretch far down the street. Old men, women with babies on their backs, young boys, and girls, all carrying plates and bowls, waited patiently. Even the rich people in town would send their drivers to pick up food for them. But while everyone was busy enjoying her meals, the other food sellers in town were not happy. There was Auntie Titi, a woman in her early 50s, who had been selling food for 20 years. She had a small shed where she sold jollof rice and beans. Then there was Chokudi, a young man who sold roasted yam and fish on the corner of the market street. They all complained in private. Why does everyone buy only from Mama Mariam? Is her food better than ours? No one even comes near my shop these days. One day, Auntie Titi sat with Chokudi under the big mango tree. She sighed and said, something is not right. I have been cooking for years, but no one wants my food anymore. It's like magic, Mama Mariam has charmed this whole town. Chokudi nodded. I think so too. People say her food is sweet, but my roasted fish is sweet too. There must be something she's hiding. Auntie Titi looked around and whispered, we need to watch her. There is no way a person's food can be so sweet every day without something behind it. At first, nobody paid much attention. After all, everyone loved Mama Mariam's food too much to stop eating it. But everything changed one fateful night. It was midnight. The town was silent except for the occasional sound of dogs barking in the distance. Mama Mariam, dressed in dark clothes, quietly slipped out of her house. In one hand, she carried a small metal bucket, and in the other, a large plastic bowl. She walked through the empty streets, looking around to make sure no one was watching her. But she didn't know someone was watching. Hidden behind the bushes, Mr. Jacob, a young security guard, saw her. Mr. Jacob was new to the town and had been assigned to guard a nearby school. He squinted his eyes in the darkness and whispered to himself, where is Mama Mariam going at this time of the night? And why is she holding a bucket? He decided to follow her. Quietly, he walked behind her, hiding in the shadows. Mama Mariam walked for a long time until she reached the edge of town. There, hidden behind a cluster of trees, was a small mortuary. Mr. Jacob gasped. The mortuary. What is she doing here? He hid behind a tree and watched. Mama Mariam walked to the back of the building where there were several large barrels. She carefully dipped her plastic bowl into one of the barrels and filled her bucket with water. Mr. Jacob's eyes widened in horror. No, it can't be, he whispered. Mama Mariam picked up her bucket of water, balanced it carefully, and began walking back to town, humming softly to herself as if nothing had happened. Mr. Jacob stood frozen for a long time, trying to understand what he had just seen. His heart was pounding. That water, is it from the dead bodies? The next morning, Mr. Jacob couldn't keep what he had seen to himself. He told a few people in the community. At first, no one believed him. What kind of lie is that? Mama Mariam. No way. Her food is too sweet for her to do something so evil. But the story was far from over. Mama Mariam still had secrets no one could have imagined. The next morning, Mr. Jacob couldn't get what he had seen out of his mind. The image of Mama Mariam scooping water from the back of the mortuary haunted him. He wanted to tell someone, but the thought of accusing someone as loved and popular as Mama Mariam made him pause. What if no one believes me? What if I lose my job for spreading rumors? He thought. For days, Mr. Jacob watched Mama Mariam quietly. Every morning, the line outside her shop continued to grow. Children with plates, mothers carrying bowls, and even workers rushing to offices, all queued up for her delicious food. People laughed and joked as they waited, completely unaware of the dark secret hidden behind the sweetness of the meals they loved so much. Meanwhile, Mama Mariam carried on as if nothing was wrong. Every night, she waited until the town was asleep before sneaking out with her bucket. She followed the same path to the mortuary and returned with her water. But this time, Mr. Jacob wasn't the only one watching her. One evening, Auntie Titi, the other food seller, decided to visit Mama Mariam's shop to see what made her food so special. She sat quietly on one of the wooden benches, pretending to eat while watching Mama Mariam serve customers. She noticed something strange. Mama Mariam never tasted the food she cooked. Auntie Titi whispered to herself, why doesn't she taste her own food? Every cook tastes what they prepare. That night, Auntie Titi couldn't sleep. Her suspicion grew stronger. She decided to investigate for herself. On the third night, Auntie Titi and Mr. Jacob both ended up outside Mama Mariam's house, each one unaware that the other was there. Hidden in the shadows, they watched as Mama Mariam came out of her house dressed in black, carrying her bucket and bowl. Auntie Titi's eyes widened. Where is she going at this hour? She whispered. Mr. Jacob, already familiar with the route, nodded to himself. I knew it. She's going to the mortuary again. Both of them quietly followed her. Mama Mariam walked quickly through the dark streets, not looking back. When she reached the mortuary, she disappeared behind the building. Auntie Titi and Mr. Jacob hid behind a nearby tree and peered into the darkness. They saw her scoop water from the barrel again. Auntie Titi gasped softly. Her hand covered her mouth, and her knees trembled. No, what is she doing? She whispered. Mr. Jacob nodded grimly. Now you see it too. I told you. She's using the water they bathe dead bodies with. By morning, the news started to spread. It began with Auntie Titi whispering to her friend at the market. Do you know Mama Mariam uses water from the mortuary to cook her food? The woman's eyes widened in shock. That's a lie. It's not a lie. I saw her with my own eyes. At midnight. Auntie Titi insisted. From one person to another, the story spread like wildfire. Before noon, the whole town was buzzing with whispers and gossip. People who had eaten at Mama Mariam's shop their whole lives suddenly looked at each other with worry. Is it true? They asked. Could Mama Mariam really do something so evil? That day, Mama Mariam's shop was empty for the first time in years. She stood behind her wooden counter, looking at the empty benches where people used to sit and eat. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped the table over and over again. When she looked outside, she saw people staring at her shop from afar, whispering to each other. In the evening, the town leaders called a meeting at the community hall. Everyone gathered there, men, women, children, and the elderly. The hall was filled with murmurs until one of the elders, Baba Sunday, stood up and raised his hand. "Quiet, everyone," he shouted. "We cannot accuse Mama Mariam without proof. We need to hear from her." Mama Mariam was brought to the front of the hall. She stood tall, wearing her usual bright Ankara wrapper and headscarf. Her face was calm, but her eyes seemed darker than before. Baba Sunday asked, "Mama Mariam, people are saying terrible things about you. Is it true that you use water from the mortuary to cook?" The crowd gasped. All eyes were on Mama Mariam. For a moment, there was silence. Then Mama Mariam spoke in a low, steady voice. "Who is saying such lies about me?" Mr. Jacob stood up from the back of the hall. "I saw you, Mama Mariam. I followed you at night. I saw you with my own eyes, carrying water from the mortuary." The crowd erupted. Shouts and screams filled the air. "You! It's true. Oh, Mama Mariam. Why? So all this time, we were eating cursed food." The news spread far beyond the small town. People stopped trusting any food seller. The once joyful town became quiet and suspicious. Everyone was afraid of eating outside their homes. But Mama Mariam's story was far from over. People still didn't know why she did what she did or how she managed to make her food so sweet. Some believed she was using dark magic. Others thought she had made a deal with the spirits. But the truth, her real secret, was still hidden deep within her. Late at night, even after the accusations, Mama Mariam still woke up, dressed in black, and left her house with her bucket. This time, someone new was following her. Someone who was determined to uncover all her secrets. That night, as Mama Mariam left her house dressed in black, carrying her bucket, she felt uneasy. The night seemed quieter than usual. Even the wind refused to blow. Unbeknownst to her, Mr. Jacob wasn't the only one watching this time. Hidden behind trees and corners, several eyes followed her every move. A small group of men from the town, led by Mr. Jacob and Baba Sunday, had gathered to uncover the truth once and for all. Mama Mariam walked quickly, her sandals making faint sounds on the dusty road. She didn't know she was being followed. The men stayed far behind, careful not to make any noise. When Mama Mariam reached the mortuary, she disappeared behind the building as usual. The men crouched behind a bush, holding their breath. Mr. Jacob whispered, "Look, she's going to the barrow again." One of the men peered through the darkness. His voice trembled. Is she really taking water from there?" They watched in horror as Mama Mariam scooped water into her bucket. Her movements were fast and practiced, as though she had done it many times before. Baba Sunday's face was filled with anger. She must be stopped tonight. Before Mama Mariam could leave, the men stepped out of the shadows, their lanterns lighting up the darkness. "Stop right there, Mama Mariam." Baba Sunday's voice boomed. Mama Mariam froze. The bucket slipped from her hand and clanged loudly against the ground. Water spilled everywhere, shining faintly under the lantern light. Her eyes darted around, searching for a way to escape, but the men had surrounded her. "What are you doing here, Mama Mariam?" Mr. Jacob demanded. She stammered, What are you talking about?" I came to fetch water." Baba Sunday stepped forward, holding up his lantern so that its light fell directly on her face. "Water? From the mortuary? Tell us the truth, Mama Mariam. Why are you here every night?" Mama Mariam's lips trembled. She looked at the men surrounding her, faces filled with anger, fear, and disbelief. She knew she couldn't escape the truth anymore. Her knees buckled, and she fell to the ground. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What did you say?" Baba Sunday demanded. Mama Mariam raised her head. Tears streamed down her face. Yes. It is true, she cried. I come here to fetch water. Water from the dead. The men gasped. One of them made the sign of the cross. Another stepped back in shock. Why, Mama Mariam? Mr. Jacob's voice was filled with pain. Why would you do such a thing? Mama Mariam wiped her face with her wrapper. Her voice shook as she spoke. Years ago, I had nothing. I was poor and hungry. No one helped me. Then one night, a strange old woman came to me. She told me there was a way to make people love my food forever. She said if I cooked with water from the dead, my food would be sweet beyond imagination. The men listened in silence, their faces pale in the lantern light. At first, I refused, Mama Mariam continued. But desperation is a dangerous thing. I was tired of being poor. So I did it. And it worked. Her voice cracked as she cried harder. People came in crowds. They loved my food. They praised me. I became someone important. But I didn't know. I didn't know the spirits were taking something in return. Taking what? Baba Sunday asked sharply. Mama Mariam looked up, her eyes dark and hollow. Pieces of their lives, she said. Their strength, their happiness, their dreams. The spirits took it all without them knowing. And now I cannot stop. The spirits won't let me. The men stood there, stunned. For a moment, no one spoke. The truth was worse than anything they had imagined. Finally, Baba Sunday said, You must confess this before the whole town, Mama Mariam. You must face the people you have wronged. Mama Mariam didn't resist. She nodded slowly, knowing there was no escape. The next morning, the entire town gathered in the square. The news had spread, and everyone was waiting, men, women, children, all whispering among themselves. Baba Sunday stood before the crowd. Today, we will hear the truth from Mama Mariam herself. Mama Mariam was brought forward. Her face was pale, and her steps were slow. She looked out at the crowd, faces she had once served with smiles and laughter. Now, those same faces looked at her with anger, pain, and betrayal. She took a deep breath and began to speak. Everything you have heard is true, she said quietly. For years, I used water from the dead to cook my food. I was foolish. I was greedy. And I let the spirits take from you without you knowing. The crowd gasped. Some people cried out in shock. I am sorry, Mama Mariam continued, tears streaming down her cheeks. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I have wronged you all. I let my desperation turn me into something I cannot recognize. The elders decided that Mama Mariam's shop would be burned down as a symbol of cleansing the town. She was banished forever, told never to return. That same day, she gathered her few belongings and walked out of the town, alone. People watched her leave, some shaking their heads, others whispering prayers. As she disappeared down the dusty road, a heavy silence fell over the town. The name Mama Mariam became a story told for generations, a warning about the dangers of greed and desperation, and the dark prices people pay for power. And so, the town slowly healed. People began to trust again. But the memory of Mama Mariam's secret stayed alive, like a shadow, never fully forgotten. What lesson do you learn from this story? And I would like to know where you are watching from in the comment section. Like this video, share and kindly subscribe for more true life stories. Thanks for watching, see you in my next video.